Hi, this is William Black, host of the Consumer Credit Matters podcast, with some quick takeaways from a symposium that I attended and participated in. The panel topic was AI in lending, or leveraging artificial intelligence in lending, a very hot topic. I thought I'd bring you some of the highlights in this very quick summary. First, starting with the definition of lending that we use, with a very narrow definition of lending, meaning the up or down decision to grant credit to an individual, as opposed to some of the ancillary activities, including, customer acquisition, customer retention, fraud detection, marketing, and things like that. Not to say that they aren't important, but the application of AI to bring about efficiencies, say a bot for a human, might be a little bit more straightforward. We didn't think got quite at the heart of lending, as it is such an important part of the economic activity. As we know, 2/3 of U.S. economic activity is supported by consumer spending. A lot of that is done on credit. And so it really kind of gets at the heart of the American dream. It's not an exaggeration or hyperbole to say that fair access to credit means participation in the American dream, to own a home, a car, to achieve a higher education, and so on. And so over the decades, laws and regulations have been enshrined around protecting fair access to credit that certainly come or play a role in discussing how something that has the promise of being transformative, that is AI, should be implemented in practice among practitioners, and that preserves those protections and those rights that we have now come to expect out of our country's institutions and laws. So we did talk about that. We framed the conversation with that in mind, and also we pointed out that there's a lot at stake here. Consumer credit outstanding is measured in the trillions, $4 trillion in autos, credit cards, student loans alone, another $12 trillion of mortgage debt on top of that. So any efficiencies, any improvements in, say, the default rate adjudication translates to tens of billions of dollars very easily per year, and that can be redeployed back into the lending ecosphere in a way that helps borrowers and lenders alike. So that was something that we also discussed to set the stage. So with that as background, the first question we asked or tried to answer was, how is AI being used today by the practitioners, boots on the ground? And the answer maybe is surprising to you. It's not very much. And that's because of some of the protections that are in place, both legal and institutional, say regulatory, meant to protect, again, fair access to credit. And that's meant to protect individuals, consumers, citizens from bias, from discrimination, from the unlawful use of private information. Again, the data, there's a vast amount of data that is available, that is out there on any individual who participates in, the digital world that we now all participate in when you use a credit card or go online and so on. But it's not the Wild West. There are guardrails that prohibit the use and manipulation of that data for all sorts of areas of our lives that maybe you take for granted, but certainly are, enshrined in law and regulations. And the regulatory institutions that are charged with monitoring and enforcing those laws, have taken that on. Okay, and that brings us to this question or point number 2, and that is, what does the regulatory landscape look like? And we tried to break that down into kind of 3 different lanes: the prudential, the securities, and the consumer regulatory lanes, if you will. So the OCC, FDIC in the prudential lane, bank regulatory lane, for example, the SEC, obviously, for securities, and then the CFPB as kind of Exhibit A for the consumer protection regulatory body. And each of them taking on kind of a principles-based approach, top-down, approach to AI as it is manifesting itself in these early months, call it, in each of their jurisdictional responsibilities. We also talked about, the dozens and dozens of proposed legislation at the state level that is a very active frontier that we're keeping a close eye on, as well as even an executive order, an EO from the Biden administration, which again, at this stage, most of that is very principles based and not particularly granular or directive. That, of course, can change. And we're seeing different approaches. We noted that between the way, say, U.S. lawmakers and regulators are approaching AI and, say, the EU regulators are approaching AI, where they appear to be more willing to be prescriptive. That's probably a generalization, but that seems to be the consensus view at this stage. So we also spoke about the black box nature of large language models, and the distinction, as we took that conversation, between explainability and interpretability. And in the context of large language models, what we meant by explainability is that it refers to the ability to describe how a model arrives at a specific decision or prediction. And it has to offer a clear, often kind of human readable rationale behind its outputs. Interpretability, on the other hand, relates to how easily a human can understand cause and effect relationships within the model, and focus on the transparency of the model's internal workings. So in the consumer credit, in the consumer lending sector, explainability would certainly help stakeholders understand why a model recommends a particular loan decision, which is obviously crucial for compliance and trust, whereas interpretability would focus more on ensuring that users can grasp how different inputs like credit history or income influence the model's predictions, aiding to risk assessments and ensuring that decisions are fair and unbiased. And these are distinctions that really matter depending on, when you're starting to discuss what the role regulators or even how you might want to craft laws might have, because some explainability are going to be easier to navigate and create laws around than say, interpretability might be. So that was something that we spent some time discussing as well. And finally, we took on the question of whether or not AI would in fact be transformative to lending, again, as we've defined it here quite narrowly. And I think the answer is not today, not in the here and now, or in the not too distant future. We don't expect AI to be that transformative. Again, for many of the reasons we've already discussed, the regulatory and legal uncertainties of that landscape are probably going to prevent most cautious lenders of scale to leap into this new technology feet first, just because the risk is going to outweigh the reward. That could change over time as the boundaries become more well-defined. I think nobody was that pessimistic to think that it wasn't going to help in the future. Certainly, we are seeing efficiencies, and in some cases, perhaps, if we believe the headlines, significant efficiencies being drawn out of the use of AI on, again, some of the other ancillary aspects to lending, again, the more operational aspects to lending. And that can help both lenders and borrowers alike, as there is more money coming to the bottom line, either by way of profits that can be redeployed as lower cost of credit or greater access to credit in the future. So that's something that certainly we can expect to see sooner rather than later. Lastly, I do want to thank the SFA for for putting on the event to begin with and inviting me and my fellow panelists, who I will name in the post here. I should add that my summary here are my own views and not theirs. I don't want to put words in any of their mouths, but I did my best to try to fairly summarize what we talked about for the course of the 45-minute panel. But thank you for listening. And if you like this, please do subscribe to my YouTube, Spotify, or Apple platforms, and or my LinkedIn newsletter. Thank you for your interest and credit.